Picture this, you're in labor, bringing your first child into the world. When you stumble into the hospital hallway and catch your billionaire husband in a passionate kiss with another woman, devastating. Absolutely. But for Anna Bellamy, that moment of ultimate betrayal was just the tip of an iceberg that would sink everything she thought she knew about her life. Because that beautiful mistress, she wasn't just stealing Anna's husband. She was the key to a massive money laundering operation involving Russian oligarchs, federal sanctions, and enough dirty money to fund a small country. What started as a cheating scandal exploded into a federal investigation that would put Anna's husband behind bars for 25 years and transform a naive socialite into one of the most powerful witnesses in financial crime history. This is the incredible true story of love, betrayal, and the mother who risked everything to protect her son from his father's toxic legacy. The sterile luxury of Lenox Hill Hospital's VIP birthing suite felt more like a five-star hotel than a medical facility. Cream-colored walls adorned with tasteful, abstract art overlooked Manhattan's glittering skyline, while the rhythmic beeping of monitors provided an expensive soundtrack to Anna Bellamy's labor pains. At 32, Anna had once been a passionate art curator with dreams that extended far beyond the gilded cage she now inhabited. 5 years of marriage to real estate mogul Blaine Bellamy had systematically stripped away her independence, replacing her gallery openings with charity galas and her artistic vision with social obligations. Another contraction, Anna gasped, her knuckles white against the designer bed rails. The pain ripped through her like fire, but it was nothing compared to the cold emptiness she felt watching her husband. Blaine stood with his back to her, silhouetted against the panoramic windows. At 42, he possessed the kind of commanding presence that had built his billion-dollar empire. His dark hair was perfectly styled despite the 10 hours they'd spent at the hospital. His Tom Ford suit immaculate as always. But his attention wasn't on his laboring wife. His fingers flew across his phone screen with the same intensity he reserved for hostile takeovers. "Blaine, please," Anna whispered, her voice barely audible over the monitors. "Can you call the nurse?" He turned, offering her the practiced smile he used in boardrooms and at society functions. It was polite, distant, and utterly hollow. "Of course, darling," he said smoothly, sliding the phone into his pocket. "I'll get Dr. Evans herself. Nothing but the best for you." He moved toward the door with fluid grace, pausing only to blow her a kiss, a gesture so perfunctory it might as well have been a business handshake. Anna watched him leave, tears mixing with the sweat on her temples. The loneliness was suffocating. This should have been the most intimate moment of their lives, the arrival of their first child, but instead she felt more isolated than ever. The baby had been her hope for connection, for something real in their sterile world of appearances. She'd imagined Blaine's face softening with wonder, his walls finally crumbling as he held their son. Instead, he treated the birth like another acquisition to be managed efficiently. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister Chloe in Chicago. "How are you holding up thinking of you both?" Anna's fingers trembled as she typed back, "Scared? Blaine seems so distant. What if this doesn't change anything?" But before she could send it, another contraction seized her, and the phone clattered to the floor. Outside in the hallway, Blaine's mask of concern evaporated the moment the door closed. His jaw clenched with barely contained frustration as he strode past the nurse's station, ignoring their deferential nods. He wasn't heading to find Dr. Evans. His destination was a secluded waiting area near the service elevators, where shadows gathered like secrets. And there she was, Blossom Rossi perched on the edge of an uncomfortable chair, her raven hair a stark contrast against the pale hospital walls. At 28, she possessed the kind of dangerous beauty that had toppled empires, and she knew it. "Blaine," she breathed, rising to meet him. He enveloped her in his arms, burying his face in her hair and inhaling her exotic perfume. It was everything Anna's subtle, clean scent wasn't: intoxicating, forbidden, addictive. "I was going crazy waiting," Blossom whispered against his chest. "Is she—" "Fine," Blaine said roughly. "The doctors are handling everything. It'll be hours yet." His hands framed her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones with a tenderness he'd never shown his wife. This was real. This was fire. This was everything his marriage wasn't. Their affair had started a year ago when she'd been hired as an art consultant for his corporate headquarters. The connection was immediate, electric, dangerous, all-consuming. With Blossom, there were no pretenses, no society expectations. She challenged him, argued with him, loved him with a ferocity that both thrilled and terrified him. "What happens after?" Blossom asked, her liquid brown eyes searching his. "When the baby comes, what happens to us?" It was the question that haunted him. He'd made promises, vague, intoxicating promises of divorce, of a future together. But the timing was never right. First a crucial merger, then his father's illness, now the birth of his heir. "Nothing changes," he said desperately. "I swear to you, this changes nothing between us. The baby is just an obligation. You are my life." He didn't know if he believed it himself, but he needed her to believe it. Without Blossom, the sterile perfection of his world would suffocate him. "Prove it," she whispered, her eyes challenging him. Blaine glanced down the empty corridor. In the distance, he could hear muffled sounds, someone crying out in pain. It might have been Anna. It might have been someone else. The sound barely registered. He lowered his head, capturing Blossom's lips in a kiss that was hungry, desperate, reckless. He pressed her against the wall, his hands tangling in her hair, drowning in her perfume and the fire she ignited in him. He was so lost in the moment that he didn't hear the soft click of a door opening. He didn't see the figure in a hospital gown stumbling into the hallway, one hand pressed against the wall for support. But Anna saw everything. The contractions had become unbearable, each wave crashing over Anna like a tsunami of fire. But it wasn't just physical pain driving her from the safety of her bed. It was something deeper, more primal. An instinct she couldn't name was screaming at her to move, to see, to know. Maria, the kind-faced nurse who'd been her only companion through the long hours, protested gently. "Mrs. Bellamy, you shouldn't be walking around. You're fully dilated. The doctor will be here any moment." "Just to the door," Anna insisted, her voice gaining an edge of steel that surprised them both. "I need some air." Each step was agony, her hospital gown rustling as she leaned heavily on Maria's arm. The IV stand trailed behind them like a metallic shadow, its wheels squeaking softly on the polished floor. Anna's hand trembled as she reached for the cool metal door handle. She could hear voices in the corridor, low, intimate murmurs that made her heart hammer against her ribs. She pushed the door open just a crack, peering through the narrow opening with growing dread. The world tilted on its axis. There was Blaine, her Blaine, his back unmistakable in its bespoke tailoring. But he wasn't alone. A woman with cascading dark hair was pressed against the wall, her beautiful face tilted up toward his in complete surrender. And he was kissing her. Not a peck on the cheek, not a friendly greeting. This was raw, desperate passion, the kind of kiss Anna hadn't received in years. His hands were buried in the woman's hair, his body molded against hers with an intimacy that spoke of familiarity, of countless stolen moments. Every lie crashed down on Anna at once. Every late night at the office, every urgent business trip, every moment of emotional distance suddenly coalesced into this one searing image. The crisis in Dubai wasn't spreadsheets and contracts, it was raven hair and red lips. A strangled cry escaped Anna's throat, a sound of such profound agony it was barely human. Blaine froze. His head snapped up, his eyes wild and unfocused before they met hers through the crack in the door. The color drained from his face as all his masks, the billionaire, the lover, the husband, disintegrated in an instant. The woman, this stranger who'd been stealing Anna's life piece by piece, pulled back with alarm, confusion flickering across her perfect features. Time stretched like taffy. Blaine's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, caught between his mistress and his wife in labor, bringing his child into the world while he betrayed her in the hallway outside. Anna stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle another sob. The movement was clumsy in her weakened state, and her arm caught the IV pole. It teetered for a moment that felt like eternity, then crashed to the floor with a deafening clatter of metal and plastic. The noise shattered the frozen tableau. Maria, who'd been watching in horrified silence, rushed forward. Two other nurses at the nearby station looked up with wide eyes. A passing orderly stopped in his tracks. The private, hushed world of the VIP wing had been breached, and there was no going back. Blaine jolted into action, taking a step toward Anna's room. Anna, wait, it's not what you think. It was the most cliché, most insulting thing he could have possibly said. Gasoline on a raging fire. A new strength born of pure, unadulterated rage surged through Anna. All the pain, fear, and loneliness of her marriage erupted in a scream that came from her very soul. Get out! The sound echoed down the corridor like a battle cry. It wasn't the voice of a society wife. It was the roar of a woman who'd lost everything and had nothing left to lose. Get him away from me, she screamed again, her voice carrying such authority that even the seasoned medical staff snapped to attention. A large security guard named Frank, who usually remained discreetly posted near the wing's entrance, came striding down the hall. His expression was grim. He'd seen his share of drama among the city's elite. But this was different. Is there a problem here? Frank asked, his voice calm but authoritative. Yes, Maria said, her professionalism taking over despite her trembling hands. She pointed at Blaine with righteous indignation. This man is causing distress to my patient. She wants him removed immediately. Blaine's face contorted with fury and humiliation. This is my wife. I'm not going anywhere. He tried to push past the nurse, but Frank stepped into his path, a solid wall of muscle, completely unimpressed by expensive suits or corporate power. Sir, you need to step back, Frank said firmly, placing a restraining hand on Blaine's chest. Do you have any idea who I am? Blaine snarled, his voice low and dangerous. It was the line that had opened doors and bent the world to his will his entire life. Frank's expression didn't flicker. Right now, sir, you're the man a patient in labor has asked to have removed. My job is to protect patients. You can walk out calmly, or I can escort you out. Your choice? The woman Blossom watched from the shadows, her face a mask of shock and fear. This wasn't part of her fantasy. The powerful, controlled Blaine she knew was being publicly humbled, and she was melting back toward the service elevator like smoke. Blaine, his pride crumbling around him, made the fatal mistake of shoving Frank's restraining hand away. Get your hands off me. That was all the invitation Frank needed. In one swift, practiced motion, he grabbed Blaine's arm, twisting it behind his back in a firm but controlled hold. That's it. We're going. Blaine struggled against the grip, his face purple with rage. I'll have your job. I'll buy this whole damn hospital and fire every last one of you. But his threats were empty now. He was just another problem to be managed, another source of chaos to be removed. A second guard arrived, and together they began half-dragging, half-walking the struggling billionaire down the corridor. His shouts of indignation and fury echoed off the sterile walls as he was forcibly removed from the scene of his own betrayal, past the stunned faces of nurses and the silent, retreating figure of his mistress. Inside the suite, Anna collapsed onto the bed, her body shaking with sobs and another terrifyingly intense contraction. The baby, she gasped. The baby is coming now. Through the open door, the last thing Anna saw was the back of her husband's head as he was dragged around the corner, his threats fading into the distance. The man who was supposed to be her partner in creating life was being hauled away like a common criminal. And in his place, new life was fighting its way into a world already shattered by betrayal. The birthing suite had transformed from a scene of luxury into a battlefield of raw emotion and medical urgency. Anna lay back against the pillows, her face streaked with tears and sweat, while Dr. Evans worked with calm efficiency. Anna, I need you to focus on me, Dr. Evans said, her voice a steady anchor in the storm. Breathe with me. Your son is ready to meet you. Through the chaos of her shattered heart, Anna found something she didn't know she possessed, a fierce, protective strength that had nothing to do with Blaine's money or status. This wasn't about their marriage anymore. This was about her and her son, with a final monumental effort that was equal parts agony and triumph. Anna brought Nicholas into the world. His healthy cry filled the room, lusty, indignant, and absolutely perfect. As the nurses cleaned and wrapped him, Anna felt a wave of love so pure and powerful, it momentarily erased everything else. When Dr. Evans placed the warm bundle in her arms, Anna looked down at Nicholas's tiny, perfect face and felt her heart reconstruct itself around this new, unbreakable bond. He's beautiful, Maria whispered, tears in her own eyes. Anna nodded, unable to speak. For the first time in hours, maybe years, she felt peace. Whatever happened next, she had this. She had him. Mrs. Bellamy, a gentle voice interrupted her reverie. Anna looked up to see a distinguished man in his 50s standing in the doorway. Arthur Vance, Blaine's personal attorney, wore an expression of such profound sadness that Anna's newfound peace immediately evaporated. Behind him stood two uniformed police officers. "What is this?" Anna whispered, instinctively pulling Nicholas closer. Arthur stepped into the room, his usually confident demeanor replaced by something that looked almost like shame. "Anna, I'm so sorry to be doing this now. There's no easy way to say this." He paused, seeming to gather himself. "Blaine has been taken into federal custody." The words didn't compute. Anna stared at him, her mind refusing to process what she'd heard. "Federal custody? What are you talking about? Security just removed him for—" She gestured helplessly toward the door. "This has nothing to do with the hospital incident," Arthur said quietly. "The FBI has been building a case against him for 18 months. He was arrested downstairs in the lobby." The room began to spin. 18 months. A lifetime during which she'd been planning nurseries, attending birthing classes, believing her husband was building their future. "Arrested for what?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Arthur's gaze finally met hers, and she saw not just pity, but a deep, world-weary sorrow. Racketeering, wire fraud, and money laundering. "Anna, Bellamy Holdings isn't what it seems. A significant portion of its capital is illegitimate." The words hit her like physical blows. The Dubai acquisition he was so focused on, it was a front to launder over $200 million from a Russian oligarch currently under federal sanctions. Anna felt the air leave her lungs. The sterile suite suddenly felt like an elaborate crime scene. Her home, her life, the very foundation she'd been building for her family, all of it was a lie. "The woman in the hallway," Anna said, pieces clicking together with horrifying clarity. "Who was she?" Arthur's expression tightened. "Her name is Blossom Rossi. She presented herself as an art consultant. In reality, she's the daughter of Alexei Petrov, the oligarch in question. The FBI believes she was the primary liaison between Blaine and her father." A cold, bitter laugh escaped Anna's lips. "Their affair was business. A very dangerous business. The federal government is moving to freeze all of his assets," Arthur continued, his voice heavy with implication. "Personal and corporate. That includes your joint accounts, credit cards, properties, everything. The beautiful penthouse, the house in the Hamptons, the carefully curated life, all smoke and mirrors built on criminality." One of the officers stepped forward apologetically. "Ma'am, we understand this is difficult, but we have a warrant to secure any personal electronics belonging to Mr. Bellamy." Anna's eyes drifted to the bedside table, where Blaine's second phone, the Dubai phone, lay next to a half-empty glass of water. Without a word, she pointed to it with a trembling finger. As the officer placed it in an evidence bag, a new realization crashed over her. Blaine wasn't just a cheating husband who'd been publicly humiliated. He was a federal criminal. And she, by virtue of being his wife, was inextricably linked to his crimes. "Anna," Arthur said, pulling a chair to her bedside. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. "You need to understand something. Blaine will try to protect himself by any means necessary. He won't hesitate to claim you knew about his activities." "I knew nothing," Anna whispered, looking down at Nicholas sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I thought he was just distant, having an affair. Not this." "I believe you," Arthur said, and for the first time, she saw something other than professional duty in his eyes. "I've been Blaine's lawyer for 15 years. 6 months ago, the FBI approached me with evidence I couldn't ignore. I've been cooperating with them ever since." Anna's head snapped up. The quiet and unassuming lawyer had been an informant. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because as of this moment, I no longer represent Blaine Bellamy," Arthur said firmly. "My duty now is to protect you and your son. The government has no interest in prosecuting you. Anna, you're a victim, but we need to act quickly to ensure everyone sees it that way." He placed a sleek tablet on the bedside table. "This is a secure device, I've transferred $5 million into a trust account in Nicholas's name. With you as sole trustee, it's from a discretionary account Blaine forgot about, money that's clean and that the feds don't know exists yet. Hope, dangerous and unfamiliar, flickered in Anna's chest. It's enough to fight him, Arthur continued, because when he gets out on bail, his first target will be you. He'll try to control the narrative, paint you as a hysteric. He'll try to take Nicholas. The thought of losing her son sent ice through Anna's veins. She looked down at Nicholas's innocent face, then back at the tablet. What do I need to do? Get some rest, Arthur said, standing. Tomorrow we go to war. As he left, Anna was alone again with her son. But the silence was different now, not the silence of abandonment, but of preparation. The gilded cage had been a lie, but her love for Nicholas was real. She picked up her personal phone and scrolled to a contact she hadn't called in years, Chloe Martinez, her sister, a tenacious investigative journalist in Chicago. Anna, Chloe's voice was warm with concern. I heard about the hospital. Are you okay? I'm better than okay, Anna said, her voice clear and steady. I have a son, and I have a story for you, the kind that brings down empires. In that moment, holding her newborn son while the city lights glittered beyond the window, Anna Bellamy ceased to be a victim. She'd been betrayed and her world destroyed. But from the ashes, a warrior was emerging. The battle for her son's future was about to begin. The first 24 hours of Nicholas's life passed in a surreal blur of federal agents, legal documents, and media chaos. While Anna focused on feeding and bonding with her son, Arthur Vance orchestrated a legal campaign with military precision. His first strike was devastating, an emergency petition for sole custody of Nicholas, citing Blaine's arrest, the federal investigation, and sworn testimony from hospital staff about his abandonment and emotional abuse. He attached Maria's detailed affidavit describing the traumatic hallway scene. The family court judge, reading the lurid details over morning coffee, signed the temporary restraining order without hesitation. Blaine was now legally prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Anna or their son. Arthur's second move was even more audacious. He contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office and formally positioned Anna as a cooperating witness, painting her as a deliberately isolated victim of psychological manipulation. He offered them Blaine's second phone on a silver platter, knowing it contained encrypted messages, offshore account numbers, and incriminating communications with the Petrov family. Meanwhile, at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, Blaine Bellamy was experiencing his first taste of powerlessness. Stripped of his Tom Ford suits and Patek Philippe watch, he was just another inmate in standard issue orange. His legal team, three sharks from Manhattan's most prestigious white shoe firm, found him pacing his cell like a caged animal. They're freezing everything, Blaine raged. My accounts, properties, investments. How am I supposed to post bail without access to my money? Marcus Thorne, his lead counsel, slid a file across the metal table with practiced calm. We're arguing the asset freeze is premature, but there's a bigger problem. Your wife filed for sole custody and a restraining order this morning, Blaine scoffed. Anna, she'll do whatever I tell her. She's probably hysterical, waiting for me to fix everything. She's being represented by Arthur Vance, Marcus said grimly. The color drained from Blaine's face. That treacherous snake. It's a conflict of interest. Apparently not. He claims his representation of you terminated the moment you were arrested. He's arguing his new duty is protecting your wife and son from a man facing federal racketeering charges. The final blow came with devastating precision. The U.S. attorney has your second phone. Blaine, the one you used at the hospital. Anna gave it to them. Blaine stopped pacing, his mind reeling. His quiet, compliant Anna had not just left him. She'd armed his enemies with the weapon that could bury him for decades. His shock curdled into venomous rage. That ungrateful bitch. After everything I gave her, I'll destroy her. She'll never see that child again. But his threats were hollow. He was the one with nothing now, no freedom, no assets, no power. His kingdom was crumbling while his forgotten wife held the match. Back at Lenox Hill, Anna was preparing to leave, not to the penthouse on Park Avenue, which was now sealed by federal agents, but to a secure apartment Arthur had arranged downtown. The space was paid for with clean money from Nicholas's trust, her first taste of independence in years. Chloe arrived just as Anna was packing her small bag of essentials. At 35, her sister possessed the sharp instincts and relentless curiosity that had made her one of Chicago's most respected investigative journalists. "I've started digging," Chloe said without preamble, enveloping Anna in a fierce hug. "This Petrov connection is massive. It ties into sanctions evasion, political corruption. This is bigger than just your scumbag husband." Anna handed her the secure tablet Arthur had provided. "Arthur's been compiling evidence for months. Everything he couldn't give the feds without violating attorney-client privilege, he can give to me, and I'm giving it to you." Chloe's eyes widened as she took the device, understanding its weight. "Anna, are you sure once this story breaks, there's no going back? The blowback will be immense." Anna looked down at Nicholas, sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I have to be sure. I won't have my son grow up with the stain of his father's crimes. We're going to build a new legacy, one based on truth." As they left the hospital flanked by private security, Anna shielded Nicholas from the paparazzi that had already gathered. She wasn't fleeing as a scorned wife, she was walking toward a future she would write herself. The secure apartment downtown became command central for what the media would later call the takedown of the decade. Arthur worked 18-hour days, coordinating with federal prosecutors while building an ironclad case for Anna's innocence. The evidence was damning: shell companies in the Cayman Islands, wire transfers routed through Swiss banks, art purchases that were actually money transfers. Blaine had built an empire on blood money, using his legitimate real estate business as a front for one of the largest money laundering operations in U.S. history. Blossom Rossi, faced with decades in federal prison, had already begun cooperating. Her testimony painted Blaine as a greedy amateur who'd stumbled into a professional criminal's web, seduced by easy money and easier sex. "He thought he was so smart," she told federal agents. "My father called him the useful fool. He was so arrogant, so desperate to prove he belonged in our world, that he never realized he was being played." The recordings were devastating. Hours of Blaine boasting about his untouchable position, his connections in city government, his ability to make problems disappear. His voice, captured on Blossom's wire, would become the soundtrack to his own destruction. But Anna's real weapon was her sister's pen. Chloe's front-page exposé, "The House of Bellamy, A Legacy of Lies," landed like a bombshell in the Sunday edition of the Chicago Tribune, immediately picked up by national outlets. Using Arthur's dossier, she laid bare the rot beneath the empire. The story didn't just detail the crimes, it painted Anna as the primary whistleblower, a woman of integrity who'd risked everything to expose the truth. "Mrs. Bellamy could have remained silent," Chloe wrote. "She could have taken her share of the blood money and disappeared. Instead, she chose to stand with the victims of her husband's greed, even knowing it would cost her everything she thought she wanted." The article framed the narrative perfectly. Anna wasn't a scorned wife seeking revenge, but a mother protecting her child from his father's toxic legacy. Blaine's attempts at damage control were pathetic by comparison. From his jail cell, he fed tabloid stories about gold-digging wives and postpartum hysteria. He even cruelly questioned Nicholas's paternity, demanding DNA tests. But Anna had learned from the master manipulator. Her response was surgical in its precision. "If Mr. Bellamy wants a paternity test, I'll happily agree," she told a primetime interviewer with calm dignity. "But I'd like to propose we also require a full psychological evaluation, with results made public. I believe it's more important for the world to understand the character of the man trying to destroy an innocent child." Her performance was flawless, credible, strong, sympathetic. She turned every attack back on him while maintaining her composure. The final nail came from an unexpected source: Eleanor Bellamy, Blaine's own mother. Horrified by her son's crimes and disgusted by his public cruelty, she issued a statement that made front pages across the country. "I am ashamed of the man my son has become," it read. "His actions have brought disgrace to our family name. I stand fully behind Anna and my grandson Nicholas. They deserve our protection, not our persecution." The statement concluded with the announcement that Bellamy Holdings Board had voted unanimously to remove Blaine as CEO permanently. Reading the news on his lawyer's tablet, Blaine finally broke. The rage dissolved into silent, racking sobs, the tears of a man who had destroyed his own world through greed and arrogance. His empire was dead. His name was poison. And the future belonged to the woman he'd underestimated and the son he'd tried to abandon. Anna Bellamy's war was just beginning, but she'd already won the most important battle, the fight for her son's soul. 2 weeks after Nicholas's birth, Anna thought she was beginning to find solid ground. The downtown apartment felt like a sanctuary, its windows offering views of a city that no longer seemed hostile. Arthur's legal maneuvers had given her breathing room, and Chloe's exposé had shifted public opinion decisively in her favor. She was learning to navigate single motherhood while building her case, establishing routines that felt almost normal. Nicholas was thriving, his infant schedule providing structure to days that had been chaotic for so long. Then the trap snapped shut. Anna was feeding Nicholas when Arthur arrived unannounced, his usually composed face grim with urgency. "We have a problem, a big one." He set his laptop on the coffee table, pulling up legal documents that made Anna's blood run cold. "Blaine's legal team found something in your prenuptial agreement, a clause I missed, one that's going to change everything." The prenup was 47 pages of dense legal language Anna had signed without reading years ago, trusting Arthur's assurance that it was standard protection for both parties. Now, that trust felt naive. "Paragraph 32, subsection C," Arthur said, his voice tight. "The fidelity clause includes a provision about children born of uncertain paternity during periods of marital discord." Anna's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means if Blaine can prove you had an affair during your marriage, he can challenge Nicholas's paternity and claim the child isn't his biological heir. If the DNA test proves he's not the father, you get nothing, no support, no custody rights, nothing." "But that's insane. I never had an affair." "I know that. You know that. But Blaine doesn't need to prove an affair happened. He just needs to raise reasonable doubt about paternity. And his lawyers have been busy." Arthur pulled up a series of photographs on his laptop. Anna stared in horror at images of herself having coffee with various men, her art dealer, Nicholas's pediatrician, even the building's doorman. "They've hired private investigators to document every interaction you've had with men over the past year. They're claiming pattern of inappropriate relationships and demanding immediate DNA testing." The devastating blow landed with surgical precision. "The family court judge who signed our emergency custody order, she's recused herself. Conflict of interest, turns out her husband's firm has business dealings with Bellamy Holdings. We're being assigned to Judge Patricia Hendricks." Anna's heart sank. She knew that name from newspaper articles, a conservative jurist known for protecting fathers' rights and skeptical of women who weaponized custody disputes. "It gets worse," Arthur continued. "They've petitioned for emergency removal of Nicholas pending DNA results. They're arguing that you're an unstable, vindictive spouse who might flee the country with a child who may not legally be yours." The words hit Anna like physical blows. "They can't take him from me. He's my son. The hearing is tomorrow, and Anna." Arthur's voice became even grimmer. "Blaine's mother has changed her position. Eleanor filed an affidavit supporting the paternity challenge." Anna felt the world tilt. "But she issued that statement supporting me. That was before Blaine's lawyers got to her. They've convinced her that you might have trapped her son with another man's child. She's demanding DNA testing to protect the Bellamy family's genetic legacy." The betrayal was staggering. Eleanor, who'd held Nicholas just days ago and called him perfect, was now questioning his very identity. That evening, Anna sat in the nursery she'd carefully prepared, holding Nicholas while he slept. Every piece of furniture had been chosen with love, every detail planned for the son she'd waited so long to meet. Now it might all be torn away. Chloe arrived to find her sister staring out at the city lights, her expression hollow. "They're going to take him," Anna whispered. "Tomorrow. They're going to take my baby and hand him to social services while they wait for DNA results. And if Blaine isn't the father—" "Stop," Chloe said firmly. "We're not going there. Nicholas is Blaine's son. Anyone with eyes can see it. This is just another manipulation tactic." But Anna couldn't shake the terror. She'd spent years watching Blaine win through intimidation and superior resources. Now those same weapons were aimed at the most precious thing in her life. The hearing the next morning was a nightmare. Judge Hendricks, a stern woman in her 60s, listened with obvious skepticism as Arthur argued for maintaining Anna's custody. Blaine's lead attorney, Marcus Thorne, painted a devastating picture of Anna as an unstable woman seeking revenge through false accusations and potential fraud. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "my client has been arrested on charges that remain unproven. Meanwhile, his wife has systematically destroyed his reputation while potentially perpetrating the greatest fraud of all, claiming his paternity of a child who may not be his." The photographs came out innocent meetings twisted into implications of infidelity. Character witnesses testified to Anna's erratic behavior and obvious distress. Even the nurse Maria was forced to describe Anna's hysterical screaming at the hospital. When Anna took the stand, she felt like prey being circled by predators. Marcus's questions were surgical, designed to make her seem calculating and unhinged. "Mrs. Bellamy, isn't it true you had your lawyer ready with custody papers before your husband was even arrested?" "No, that's not. You gave his personal phone to federal agents without waiting for a warrant." "Correct. I was cooperating with—" "You immediately contacted a journalist to publish damaging stories about my client." Each question was a trap, making her reasonable actions seem vindictive and premeditated. The judge's decision was swift and devastating. Given the serious questions raised about paternity and the clear conflict between the parties, "I'm ordering temporary removal of the minor child to neutral custody pending DNA testing and psychological evaluation of the mother." Anna's scream of "no" echoed through the courtroom as two social workers approached to take Nicholas from her arms. "Please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "Don't take him from me. I'm his mother." But the law was inexorable. Nicholas was placed in emergency foster care with a state-approved family, his cries as he was taken from Anna's arms haunting everyone present. Anna collapsed as they led her son away, her world crumbling for the second time in 3 weeks. Chloe and Arthur helped her to her feet, but she felt broken beyond repair. "How did this happen?" she whispered. "How did I go from victim to losing my child?" Arthur's jaw was tight with rage. "Because Blaine Bellamy is a master manipulator, and the system can be gamed by people with enough money and connections." But even as Anna grieved, Chloe was already working. Her journalist instincts had caught something during the hearing, a detail that didn't fit. "Eleanor's sudden change of heart," she told Arthur as they helped Anna into the car. "It's too convenient, too complete. Someone got to her, and I'm going to find out how." Anna barely heard them. She was staring at the empty car seat where Nicholas should have been, wondering how love could be so easily twisted into loss. The warrior who'd emerged from the hospital was gone, replaced by a broken woman who'd learned that sometimes the system meant to protect children could be weaponized against their mothers. But somewhere in her shattered heart, a spark of her old fire still glowed. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Anna's breakdown lasted 3 days. She couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't stop replaying the moment Nicholas was taken from her arms. The apartment that had felt like a sanctuary now felt like a tomb, filled with reminders of the son she couldn't hold. Chloe barely left her side, managing Anna's medication schedule and forcing her to drink water when she refused food. Arthur worked around the clock, filing appeals and searching for legal precedents that might return Nicholas faster. On the 4th day, something shifted. Anna woke before dawn and found herself standing in Nicholas's empty nursery, staring at the crib that should have held her son. The grief was still there, raw and overwhelming, but underneath it, she felt something else growing. Rage. Pure, focused, righteous rage. She'd spent years being Blaine's perfect wife, accommodating his needs and swallowing her own voice. Even in their divorce battle, she'd fought defensively, reacting to his moves instead of making her own. No more. When Chloe found her an hour later, Anna was dressed, clear-eyed, and scrolling through the secure tablet Arthur had given her. "I want to see everything," Anna said without preamble. "Every file, every document, every piece of evidence Arthur has on Blaine. If he wants to destroy me, I'm going to return the favor." Chloe recognized the tone. It was the voice of their mother, a woman who'd fought breast cancer with the same quiet ferocity Anna was displaying now. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Blaine made one crucial mistake," Anna said, pulling up financial records on the tablet. "He assumed I was helpless without him. He never considered that I might have been paying attention all these years. For 5 years, Anna had attended charity galas, board meetings, and business dinners as Blaine's ornamental wife. She'd smiled and nodded while powerful men discussed deals, assuming she was too naive to understand their conversations. They were wrong. Arthur's been focused on defending me, Anna continued, her voice gaining strength. But defense isn't enough. We need to go on offense. And I know exactly where to hit him. She pulled up a series of documents, contracts, wire transfers, and meeting notes that painted a clear picture of Blaine's criminal enterprise. But hidden among them was something even more damaging, evidence of a pattern. Blaine didn't start with the Russians, Anna said, showing Chloe encrypted files that detailed earlier transactions. He's been laundering money for 3 different criminal organizations over the past decade. The feds only know about Petrov because that's where they started investigating. The implications were staggering. Blaine wasn't just a businessman who'd made one bad deal. He was a career criminal who'd built his entire empire on dirty money. There's more, Anna said, pulling up documents that made Chloe whistle in disbelief. Remember Eleanor's sudden change of heart about the paternity test? Look at this. The financial records showed a massive payment to Eleanor Bellamy just 2 days before she filed her affidavit, $5 million, transferred from an offshore account. Blaine bought his own mother's testimony, Chloe breathed. And that's witness tampering, Anna said with grim satisfaction. A federal crime that's going to add years to his sentence and destroy his credibility in family court. Anna's plan was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of waiting for DNA results that would take weeks, she would go on the offensive. Arthur would file new federal charges based on the evidence Anna had discovered, while Chloe would publish a follow-up exposé that would make Blaine's earlier humiliation look gentle. But Anna's real weapon was more personal. She was going to testify before a federal grand jury, not as the protected wife of a criminal, but as a witness with intimate knowledge of his operations. For 5 years, I watched him conduct business at our dinner table, Anna told Arthur as they prepared her testimony. I know which judges he bribed, which politicians he owned, which deals were facades for money laundering. He never thought I was smart enough to understand what I was hearing. The grand jury testimony was devastating. Anna spoke for 6 hours, detailing conversations, naming names, and providing a roadmap to corruption that reached into the highest levels of New York politics and real estate. When news of her testimony leaked, the media firestorm was immediate. Anna had transformed from victim to whistleblower, from scorned wife to federal witness. The narrative had shifted completely. Blaine's response was swift and vicious. Through his lawyers, he released a statement claiming Anna was fabricating evidence to avoid prosecution herself. He painted her as a desperate woman willing to lie to protect herself and steal his son. But his credibility was already cracking. The revelation about paying Eleanor for her testimony had made national news, and public opinion was turning decisively against him. The real blow came when Eleanor herself, horrified by the publicity and her son's manipulation, issued a new statement through her own attorney. I was coerced into questioning my grandson's paternity through financial pressure and emotional manipulation. The statement read, I retract my previous affidavit completely. Nicholas is my grandson, and I support his mother's fight for custody. Judge Hendricks, faced with evidence of witness tampering and Blaine's mother's retraction, had no choice but to order an immediate review of her custody decision. 3 weeks after Nicholas had been taken from her arms, Anna walked into the same courtroom for an emergency hearing. This time, the dynamics were completely different. Arthur presented Eleanor's retraction, evidence of the bribery, and preliminary DNA results that confirmed what everyone already knew: Nicholas was Blaine Bellamy's biological son. Your Honor, Arthur said with quiet dignity, my client has been vindicated on every front. The paternity challenge was fraudulent, based on perjured testimony obtained through criminal bribery. She has cooperated fully with federal authorities while being subjected to unconscionable harassment by a man facing decades in prison. The social worker who'd been caring for Nicholas testified that the baby was healthy, but clearly missing his mother, crying frequently and refusing bottles. When Anna took the stand this time, she wasn't the desperate woman who'd pleaded for her son weeks earlier. She was calm, composed, and absolutely certain of her rights. Your Honor, I've never asked for anything I didn't deserve, she said clearly. I've never claimed my son was anyone's but his father's. I've cooperated with law enforcement despite having my life destroyed. All I want is what every mother deserves, the right to raise my child in safety and truth. Judge Hendricks, clearly embarrassed by the manipulation of her courtroom, didn't hesitate. Custody is hereby returned to the mother immediately. All previous restrictions are lifted. Mr. Bellamy's parental rights are suspended pending resolution of his criminal charges. Anna's legs nearly gave out as she realized what she'd heard. She was getting Nicholas back. Today. Now. An hour later, she held her son again for the first time in 3 weeks. Nicholas looked up at her with serious eyes, as if he remembered everything that had happened. When he smiled and reached for her face, Anna finally allowed herself to cry, not tears of grief, but of overwhelming relief and joy. Chloe captured the moment on her phone, knowing it would become the iconic image of Anna's fight back. Mother and son reunited, love triumphant over manipulation and greed. But even as Anna celebrated this victory, she knew the war was far from over. Blaine still had appeals, still had lawyers, still had the capacity to cause damage from his prison cell. The difference now was that Anna was no longer fighting defensively. She'd learned to use Blaine's own weapons against him: superior knowledge, strategic thinking, and the kind of ruthless focus that had once made him powerful. The student had become the master, and class was still in session. With Nicholas safely back in her arms, Anna thought the worst was over. She'd won the custody battle, exposed Blaine's bribery, and secured her position as a federal witness. Surely now she could focus on rebuilding her life. She was wrong. Blaine, facing the destruction of everything he'd built, launched a final, desperate assault designed to destroy Anna's credibility and paint her as the real villain. If he was going down, he was determined to take her with him. The attack came from multiple directions simultaneously. Blaine's PR firm, working on contingency for the chance to collect millions if they could secure his freedom, orchestrated a campaign that was breathtaking in its scope and viciousness. The first wave hit Anna's phone at 6 a.m. with a call from Arthur, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Turn on Channel 7, now." Anna fumbled for the remote while bouncing Nicholas, who was fussy from teething. The morning news was running a segment titled, "The Real Anna Bellamy Gold Digger or Grieving Wife." The report was devastating in its thoroughness. Hidden cameras had captured Anna's sister Chloe meeting with federal agents. The footage was edited to suggest Chloe was being paid for information. With a Chiron reading, "Journalist sister profits from family tragedy," sources close to the investigation suggest Mrs. Bellamy may have orchestrated her husband's downfall for financial gain. The anchor reported with practiced concern. Federal agents confirmed they're reviewing her level of knowledge about allegedly criminal activities. Anna's stomach dropped. They were turning her cooperation against her, making it seem like she'd been complicit all along. The second wave came an hour later, a series of social media posts from anonymous sources revealing Anna's lavish spending during her marriage. The posts included photos of her at charity galas, shopping on Fifth Avenue, and vacationing in the Hamptons, all activities she'd participated in as Blaine's wife, but now presented as evidence of greed and moral bankruptcy. The third wave was the most personal. At noon, a tabloid published a front-page story, "Baby Nicholas, a Pawn in Mother's Revenge Game." The article included quotes from child psychology experts, questioning whether Anna's high-stress lifestyle was appropriate for an infant. By evening, the narrative had shifted dramatically. Social media was flooded with comments calling Anna a money-hungry witch and demanding she be investigated for child endangerment. Justice for Blaine was trending on Twitter. Anna watched the destruction of her reputation in real time, feeling helpless as 5 years of careful public image work was obliterated in a single day. "How are they doing this?" she asked Arthur as they watched another news segment question her fitness as a mother. "Money," Arthur said grimly. "Blaine's offshore accounts may be frozen, but he still has access to cryptocurrency and shell company funds the feds haven't found. He's spending millions on this campaign." The next morning brought fresh horrors. Anna discovered protesters outside her building carrying signs reading "Gold Digger" and "Free Blaine Bellamy." Building security was overwhelmed, forcing Anna and Nicholas to remain trapped inside. Worse, Anna's email was flooded with death threats from Blaine's supporters. The messages were vile. targeting both her and Nicholas with language so brutal that Arthur immediately forwarded them to the FBI. "We need to get you out of the city," Chloe said, arriving with groceries and dark circles under her eyes. "This is getting dangerous." But Anna refused to run. "That's exactly what he wants. If I disappear now, it confirms everything they're saying about me." The campaign reached its crescendo with a primetime special on a major cable network, The Bellamy Conspiracy: How One Woman Destroyed an American Success Story. The hour-long program featured interviews with Blaine's business associates, former employees, and even some of Anna's former friends, all painting her as a calculating manipulator who'd planned her husband's downfall. The most damaging segment featured Eleanor Bellamy herself, visibly distressed and claiming she'd been pressured into changing her testimony. "Anna was always cold," Eleanor said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "She never loved Blaine the way he deserved. When she had the chance for revenge, she took it, regardless of who got hurt." Anna watched in horror as her own mother-in-law, the woman who'd held Nicholas just weeks ago, painted her as a monster on national television. "She's being coached," Arthur said grimly. "Everything she's saying follows Blaine's legal strategy perfectly." The program ended with an explosive revelation, an exclusive interview with Blossom Rossi. Speaking from an undisclosed location, Blossom, looking vulnerable and frightened, claimed Anna had known about the money laundering all along. "She knew about the art purchases, the overseas accounts," Blossom said tearfully. "She helped plan some of the transactions. When the FBI started investigating, she made a deal to save herself by destroying Blaine." It was all lies, but the lies were convincing. Blossom was a beautiful, sympathetic figure who seemed to have nothing to gain by lying. Her testimony was devastating. Anna's phone rang constantly with interview requests, book offers, and opportunities to tell her side of the story. But Arthur warned her against responding. "Anything you say will be twisted," he said. "We need to let the legal process work." But the legal process was slow, and public opinion was turning decisively against Anna. Overnight, she'd become one of the most hated women in America. The low point came when Anna took Nicholas for a routine pediatrician appointment. Protesters surrounded the medical building, screaming accusations and holding signs with her photo crossed out in red. One woman managed to get close enough to spit at Anna's car window, shouting, "Baby killer," as security rushed to intervene. Anna made it to the appointment, but she was shaking so badly she could barely hold Nicholas during his examination. "Mrs. Bellamy," Dr. Peterson said gently, "I'm concerned about your stress levels. This kind of pressure isn't healthy for you or Nicholas." That night, Anna sat in Nicholas's nursery, watching him sleep and wondering if her fight for truth was worth the cost. She'd won custody of her son, but at what price he would grow up knowing his mother was reviled by millions of people who'd never met her. For the first time since the battle began, Anna considered surrender. Maybe she should take Nicholas and disappear, start over somewhere no one knew their names. But as she watched her son's peaceful face, she remembered something her own mother had told her years ago. Sometimes doing the right thing makes you enemies, but living with the consequences of doing the wrong thing is worse. Anna picked up her phone and called Chloe. "I want to do an interview," she said. "One interview, prime time, live television, no editing, no manipulation, just me, telling the truth." Chloe was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure once you go public, there's no taking it back?" Anna looked down at Nicholas, sleeping peacefully despite the chaos surrounding their lives. "I'm sure. It's time to stop playing defense. If Blaine wants a media war, I'll give him one he'll never forget." The battle for public opinion was about to enter its final phase, and Anna Bellamy was ready to fight for her son's future with everything she had. Anna's decision to grant a live television interview sent shockwaves through both camps. Blaine's legal team, confident their media blitz had destroyed her credibility, suddenly found themselves scrambling to prevent what could be their client's final blow. They filed emergency motions claiming Anna was violating court orders about public statements. They threatened to sue the network for providing a platform for known fabrications. They even had Eleanor Bellamy issue another statement expressing concern for my grandson's privacy. But Anna had chosen her venue carefully. The interview would air on Truth Matters, a respected news program known for thorough fact-checking and aggressive follow-up questioning. Host Sarah Chen had built her reputation by exposing lies, regardless of who told them. The morning of the interview, Anna stood in her bathroom mirror, applying makeup with steady hands. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, a simple navy dress that suggested competence without ostentation, minimal jewelry that conveyed sincerity over wealth. Chloe knocked softly on the door. "You ready for this?" "As ready as I can be," Anna replied, checking her appearance one final time. "How's Nicholas?" "Perfect angel with the sitter. He smiled when I left, like he knows mommy's fighting for him." Anna's resolve strengthened. This wasn't about her reputation anymore. It was about the truth that Nicholas deserved to inherit. The studio was smaller than Anna had expected, intimate in a way that would make lies harder to tell. Sarah Chen was professional but warm during their brief pre-interview chat, explaining the format and assuring Anna they would fact-check everything in real time. "Mrs. Bellamy," Sarah began once they were live, "you've been largely silent while your reputation has been systematically destroyed over the past month. Why speak out now?" Anna looked directly into the camera, imagining Nicholas watching years from now. "Because silence is being interpreted as guilt, and I won't let my son grow up believing his mother was a criminal. Let's address the most serious allegations. Blossom Rossi claims you knew about the money laundering and helped plan transactions. Is that true?" "It's absolutely false," Anna said without hesitation. "I can prove it." Sarah's eyebrows raised slightly. "How?" "Because every transaction Blossom mentioned happened while I was verifiably somewhere else. My calendar, credit card records, even social media posts, all time-stamped and independently verified, show I was at charity events, medical appointments, or out of the country entirely." Anna had spent weeks preparing for this moment, cross-referencing every claim against her documented activities. Arthur's team had assembled an airtight alibi for each alleged incident. "Furthermore," Anna continued, "Blossom's testimony contains a fatal flaw. She claims I helped plan the Cayman Islands transfers in March of last year. But I was in the hospital that entire week with pneumonia, something easily verified through medical records." Sarah consulted her notes, where Anna's team had provided documentation for every claim. The fact-checking was happening in real time, and Anna was passing every test. "Your mother-in-law, Eleanor Bellamy, has suggested you manipulated the custody situation for financial gain. How do you respond?" Anna's expression hardened slightly. "Eleanor was paid $5 million by her son to change her testimony about Nicholas's paternity. That payment is documented in federal court filings. She was either complicit in bribery or coerced into it. Either way, her credibility is compromised." "That's a serious accusation. It's a documented fact," Anna replied firmly. "The wire transfer records are public information now. Anyone can verify them." Sarah moved to the most explosive topic. "There are suggestions that you orchestrated your husband's downfall for revenge. Did you plan any of this?" "I couldn't have planned something I never saw coming," Anna said, her voice steady but emotional. 36 hours before my husband's arrest, I thought my biggest problem was his infidelity. I had no idea about the money laundering, the Russian connections, or the federal investigation." She paused, gathering herself. "The idea that I could have orchestrated a multi-year FBI investigation is both ridiculous and insulting. I'm not a criminal mastermind. I'm a mother who discovered her husband had built our life on blood money." "But you did cooperate with federal authorities immediately." "Of course I did. When I learned my son's inheritance was built on criminal proceeds, I had a choice: protect the money or protect my child's future. That's not revenge, that's motherhood." The interview's turning point came when Sarah asked about the hospital scene that had started everything. "Walk us through that moment when you discovered your husband with his mistress." Anna's composure finally cracked slightly, tears gathering in her eyes. "I was in labor with our son, alone and terrified, while my husband was in the hallway kissing another woman. That betrayal was devastating enough, but learning it was all part of a criminal conspiracy was beyond comprehension." Her voice strengthened again. "I gave birth to my son while federal agents were arresting his father. Nicholas's first moments in this world were surrounded by chaos and lies. I'm fighting to make sure that's not how his story ends." Sarah delivered the interview's most powerful moment. "What do you want people to know about who you really are?" Anna looked directly into the camera, speaking to the millions watching and to her son's future. I'm not perfect. I made mistakes marrying a man I didn't really know, staying silent when I should have asked questions, caring more about appearances than truth. She paused, her voice gaining strength. But I'm not a criminal. I'm not a gold digger. I'm not a manipulator. I'm a mother who discovered her life was built on lies and chose truth over comfort. I chose my son's future over my own security. Her final words were delivered with quiet dignity. Blaine Bellamy is counting on people believing that I'm the villain in this story. But the real villain is greed, the kind of greed that destroys families, corrupts institutions, and steals children's innocence. I won't let greed win, not when my son's future is at stake. Crying nut. The interview ended, but its impact was immediate and devastating to Blaine's narrative. Social media sentiment began shifting within hours. Truth Matters started trending, pushing aside our justice for Blaine. More importantly, Anna's documented evidence began circulating online. Independent journalists verified her claims about being elsewhere during key transactions. Medical records confirmed her hospitalization. The timeline of her knowledge versus the FBI investigation became clear. Within 24 hours, Blossom Rossi's interview was being dissected and debunked. Her claims about Anna's involvement fell apart under scrutiny, and questions arose about who had coached her testimony. Eleanor Bellamy, faced with public documentation of her son's bribery payment, issued a statement through her attorney. I have been subjected to financial and emotional manipulation by my son. My previous statements about Anna were made under duress. I apologize to her and my grandson for any harm caused. The final blow came when the FBI announced they were investigating Blaine for additional charges related to witness tampering and obstruction of justice crimes that carried severe additional penalties. Blaine's media war had backfired spectacularly. His lies were unraveling faster than his lawyers could spin new ones, and public opinion was swinging decisively back toward Anna. But Anna knew the real victory wasn't in winning public approval. It was in creating a record of truth that Nicholas could read when he was old enough to understand. Her son would know his mother had fought for him with honesty and courage. That was worth more than any fortune built on lies. 6 months after Nicholas's birth, Anna sat in the federal courthouse gallery, watching the final act of Blaine Bellamy's downfall. The man who had once commanded boardrooms and bent the city to his will now sat at the defendant's table in a standard-issue suit. His expensive haircut grown out and his confident demeanor replaced by the hollow stare of someone who'd lost everything. The trial had been swift and devastating. The evidence Arthur had helped compile, combined with Anna's cooperation and Blossom's eventual full confession, had painted an undeniable picture of a decade-long criminal enterprise. Blaine had been convicted on all counts: racketeering, money laundering, wire fraud, conspiracy, and the additional charges of witness tampering and obstruction of justice. The jury had deliberated for less than 6 hours. Now came sentencing. Judge Margaret Walsh, a no-nonsense federal jurist with 30 years on the bench, reviewed the case with the thoroughness it deserved. She'd read every document, heard every witness, and seen every piece of evidence that detailed Blaine's transformation from legitimate businessman to career criminal. Mr. Bellamy, Judge Walsh began, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. You have been convicted of crimes that strike at the heart of our financial system and national security. Your actions facilitated money laundering for terrorist organizations, oligarchs under federal sanctions, and international crime syndicates. Anna held her breath, Nicholas sleeping peacefully in her arms despite the gravity of the moment. More disturbing to this court, the judge continued, is your complete lack of remorse and your attempts to destroy innocent people to save yourself. Your manipulation of your own mother, your harassment of your wife, and your attempts to weaponize the custody of your infant son demonstrate a level of moral bankruptcy that goes beyond mere greed. Blaine's lawyers had prepared an elaborate plea for mercy, citing his previously unblemished reputation and charitable contributions to the community. But Judge Walsh was unmoved. The court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, to be followed by 10 years of supervised release. All assets obtained through criminal activity are forfeited to the United States government for victim restitution. The gavel fell with finality. Blaine Bellamy, at 42, would likely spend the rest of his productive life behind bars. As he was led away in shackles, He turned to look at Anna one final time, not with hatred, but with the broken expression of a man who'd finally understood the true cost of his choices. Anna felt no satisfaction in his destruction, only relief that the threat to her son's future was finally neutralized. Outside the courthouse, Arthur briefed Anna on the next steps. The asset forfeiture will take months to complete, but preliminary estimates suggest victim restitution will total over $800 million. You'll receive approximately $50 million as the spouse defrauded by the criminal enterprise. Anna nodded, but the money seemed almost irrelevant now. She'd learned to live on much less, and Nicholas's trust fund was already sufficient for his needs. What about Eleanor? Anna asked. She's cooperating fully with asset recovery and has agreed to testify in the related political corruption cases. The payment she received from Blaine is being returned as part of restitution. Anna's relationship with her former mother-in-law remained complicated, but Eleanor's genuine remorse and her public support during the final trial had begun healing some wounds. The real surprise came that evening. Anna was feeding Nicholas when Arthur called with unexpected news. "The Justice Department wants to offer you a position," he said. "Senior Advisor for Financial Crimes Victim Advocacy. They're creating a new office to help spouses and family members navigate cases like yours." Anna was quiet for a long moment, considering the offer. It would mean staying in New York, remaining in the public eye, and reliving her trauma to help others. But it would also mean turning her painful experience into something meaningful. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But Anna, you've become a symbol of courage for a lot of people. Your story has changed how federal prosecutors approach these cases. That's a powerful legacy." After hanging up, Anna walked to Nicholas's nursery and stood looking out at the city lights. The same view that had once seemed cold and hostile now looked like possibility. She'd survived Blaine's attempts to destroy her, built a new life from nothing, and secured her son's future. But more than that, she'd discovered strength she never knew she possessed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Chloe. "Saw the news. How are you feeling?" Anna typed back, "Free," and for the first time in years, that was exactly how she felt. The next morning brought another surprise. Anna opened her apartment door to find a small package with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, Anna holding newborn Nicholas in the hospital, taken just moments after his birth. There was no note, but Anna knew who had sent it. Blossom Rossi, now in witness protection, had somehow obtained a copy of the hospital's documentation photos. It was an unexpected gesture of what apology regret. Anna studied the image, her face exhausted, but radiant with new motherhood. Nicholas perfect and peaceful in her arms. It captured a moment of pure love, unmarred by the chaos that would follow. She decided to frame it. Whatever Blossom's motivations, this was the beginning of Anna's real story, the moment she became Nicholas's mother and started fighting for his future. 3 weeks later, Anna accepted the Justice Department position. Her first case involved helping the wife of a money launderer in Miami navigate federal seizure proceedings while protecting her children's college funds. As Anna listened to the woman's story so similar to her own, she realized this was why she'd survived everything. Not for revenge, not for money, but to help other women find their way through the wreckage of their husband's crimes. Nicholas, now 9 months old and sitting in his high chair, clapped his hands as Anna explained the legal process to her client via video call. He seemed to approve of his mother's new career. That evening, Anna updated her social media for the first time since the trial. She posted the hospital photo of her and Nicholas with a simple caption, "New beginnings, for all of us." The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, but Anna barely read them. She was focused on the future now, not the past. Blaine Bellamy had tried to write her story as tragedy. Instead, Anna had transformed it into triumph, not just for herself, but for every woman who would benefit from the changes her case had created. The gilded cage was gone forever. In its place was something much more valuable, a life built on truth, a career dedicated to justice, and a son who would grow up knowing his mother had never stopped fighting for what was right. 1 year after Nicholas's birth, Anna stood in the same hospital where her life had shattered and rebuilt itself. But this time, she wasn't a patient. She was a keynote speaker at the annual conference for healthcare social workers, sharing her story as part of a panel on domestic abuse and financial crimes. The hardest part, Anna told the audience of professionals who dealt with trauma daily, wasn't the betrayal itself. It was realizing that everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. When the foundation of your world crumbles, you discover whether you're strong enough to build something better. Nicholas sat in the front row with his nanny, now a healthy, curious toddler who seemed fascinated by the sea of faces watching his mother speak. At 13 months, he was walking confidently and had recently learned to say "mama" with such enthusiasm that it melted Anna's heart every time. I used to think strength meant enduring silence, keeping peace at any cost, Anna continued. I learned that real strength means speaking truth, even when it destroys the life you thought you wanted. After her presentation, Anna was approached by Dr. Evans, the physician who had delivered Nicholas during that chaotic night a year ago. I've followed your story, Doctor, Evans said warmly. I'm so proud of how you've transformed something so painful into something that helps others. It's what Nicholas deserves, Anna replied, watching her son charm the conference attendees with his infectious grin. He should know his mother fought for truth, not comfort. Anna's new life had settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable and meaningful. Her work with the Justice Department had expanded beyond individual cases to policy development, helping draft legislation that would better protect families caught in financial crime investigations. The Bellamy family fortune, once built on blood money, was being systematically redistributed to victims through one of the largest restitution programs in federal history. Anna had kept only what she needed for Nicholas's education and security, a fraction of what she could have claimed. Eleanor Bellamy had become an unexpected ally in the restitution process, using her knowledge of Blaine's hidden assets to help recover funds for victims. Their relationship remained careful but genuine, bonded by shared love for Nicholas and shared regret for Blaine's choices. He asks about his father sometimes, Anna confided to Arthur during one of their monthly dinners. Not yet, obviously, but someday he will. What will you tell him? Anna had thought about this often. The truth, appropriate to his age, that his father made terrible choices that hurt many people, including our family, but also that he is not responsible for those choices, and that his worth comes from his own actions, not his father's legacy. Arthur smiled. You've become quite wise about these things. Survival teaches you wisdom you never wanted to learn. That evening, Anna received an unexpected call from Chloe, now working on a book about financial crimes and their impact on families. I got a strange call today, Chloe said. Someone claiming to represent Blossom Rossi. She wants to contribute to Nicholas's education fund. Anna was quiet for a moment. Blossom remained in witness protection, her cooperation having been crucial in dismantling several other criminal networks connected to her father. What did you tell them? That I'd ask you, but Anna, it was a substantial amount, enough to fund his college education completely. Anna looked across the room where Nicholas was playing with blocks, his concentration absolute as he attempted to build a tower taller than himself. Tell them thank you, but no, Anna said finally. Nicholas's future shouldn't be built on money from that world, even as an apology. He'll earn his way forward. It was a decision that felt right for both practical and symbolic reasons. Anna wanted Nicholas to understand that integrity sometimes meant walking away from easy solutions. 6 months later, Anna received another unexpected communication, this time directly from Blaine. It was a letter forwarded through his attorney, written in the careful handwriting of someone with too much time to think. Anna, it read, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, and I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I understand now what I destroyed. You were the best part of my life, and I was too arrogant and greedy to see it. Thank you for protecting Nicholas from my choices. Thank you for giving him the mother he deserves. I hope someday he can understand that his father's failures don't define his possibilities. I'm glad you found your strength. I always knew it was there. I was just too selfish to want you to use it. Give Nicholas my love. If you think it's appropriate, tell him his father hopes he grows up to be everything I failed to be. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends for what I've done. It will never be enough, but it's all I have left to offer. Be well, Anna. You deserve every happiness. Anna read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in a file she'd started for Nicholas documents he might want to read when he was older and could understand the complexity of his father's choices. She felt no anger anymore, only sadness for the waste of it all. Blaine had possessed intelligence, charm, and opportunity. He could have built something lasting and legitimate. Instead, he'd chosen shortcuts that led to destruction, but his failure had become her foundation. Every day, Anna made choices that prioritized truth over convenience, integrity over profit, love over fear. She was building the life she should have demanded from the beginning. On Nicholas's second birthday, Anna threw a small party in the community garden she'd helped establish in their neighborhood. It was funded partially through victim restitution programs and served families affected by financial crimes, a practical application of healing that felt more valuable than any charity gala. As she watched Nicholas toddle between the garden beds, laughing as other children showed him how to water the vegetables, Anna felt the deep satisfaction of a life aligned with her values. Chloe, now engaged to a fellow journalist she'd met while covering financial crime stories, captured the moment on her camera. "He looks happy," Chloe observed. "He is happy," Anna replied. "And he's safe. That's everything I wanted for him." That evening, as Anna tucked Nicholas into bed, he looked up at her with serious eyes and said, "Mama strong." It was his newest phrase, picked up from conversations he'd overheard about his mother's work. Anna kissed his forehead, marveling at how this small person had given her the courage to become someone she'd never imagined she could be. "You make Mama strong," she whispered back. Later that night, Anna updated the journal she'd been keeping for Nicholas, a record of their journey from the wreckage of Blaine's crimes to the life they'd built together. "My dearest Nicholas," she wrote, "today you turned 2 years old in a garden we helped plant, surrounded by friends we chose, in a life we built with truth and love. Your father's mistakes gave us pain, but they also gave us purpose. I want you to know that you were never a burden or a complication. You were the reason I found strength I never knew I possessed. You were the future worth fighting for when everything else seemed lost. Someday you'll face choices about what kind of person you want to become. I hope you'll remember that real wealth isn't measured in money or power, but in the love you give and the truth you tell. I hope you'll choose courage over comfort, integrity over convenience. Most of all, I hope you'll know that you are loved completely, not for what you might achieve or acquire, but for who you are. That love will never change, never diminish, never depend on anything you do or don't do. You are my greatest joy and my most important work. Everything good in our life flows from the moment you were born and changed everything. Love always, Mama." Anna closed the journal and looked out her window at the city lights that had once seemed so cold and hostile. Now they looked like possibility millions of people writing their own stories, making their own choices, building their own versions of happiness. She'd learned that the most beautiful life isn't the one that looks perfect from the outside, but the one built on authentic choices aligned with your deepest values. The gilded cage had been beautiful, but it had been a prison. Freedom, even with its struggles and uncertainties, was infinitely more valuable. Nicholas's soft breathing from the next room reminded Anna of why she'd fought so hard and sacrificed so much. He would grow up knowing his worth wasn't dependent on his father's name or fortune. He would learn that true security came from character, not capital. And perhaps most importantly, he would understand that love, real love, wasn't something you performed or earned, but something you chose to give and receive every day. As Anna prepared for bed, she felt the deep peace that comes from a life lived with purpose. The woman who had once defined herself as Blaine Bellamy's wife was gone. In her place was Anna Martinez Bellamy, federal advocate, community organizer, and most importantly, Nicholas's mother. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain but unafraid. Whatever challenges came next, Anna would face them with the strength she'd discovered in her darkest hour, the strength that had always been there, waiting for her to believe in it. Some stories end with revenge. Others end with redemption. Anna's story ended with something more valuable than either the quiet triumph of a woman who had chosen truth over comfort and built something beautiful from the wreckage of someone else's greed. Outside her window, the city hummed with possibility, and inside her home, her son slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that he was loved completely and unconditionally. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything.